Hello, welcome back to Ph.D. Guru, where you will meet with PhD peers and share tips to survive and grow on this journey together. I'm host Mary, and with me this week is my friend and colleague, Quasi. Welcome to the show, Quasi. Download.
All right, Quasi, can you tell me about yourself, like your story?
Yes. So, my name is Quasi Burgess. I am originally from Guyana in South America, and I came to the United States in 2001 when I was 10 years old. And so I had some experience in American schools, but also experience in Guyana, schooling in Guyana. And, I went to Albany schools, I went to Plattsburgh for undergrad and my first master's. And then now I'm in the doctoral program. I am currently an educator in Albany schools. I'm a middle school teacher. I teach English language arts. And, as we continue to share more and talk, you'll kind of see how kind of all these things kind of intertwine and kind of make me who I am now.
How many years have you been in the program?
In the doctoral program? So I would say 4 years.
4 years. Oh,
Yeah.
Time flies. I think we met when you're like in your first year.
Yes.
And I'm also the same.
Yes.
Yeah. So why English language arts? Why not like a physics teachers or like a math teachers? And what motivated you as a working teacher to come back to school and do the PhD?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I was never I was never meant to be an English teacher. Math was my passion. And when I graduated with my undergrad in education, I didn't know how to teach. I graduated elementary degree. And the idea of becoming an elementary teacher and not knowing how to teach reading and writing, that was scary. And so I went into a literacy program and ended up, really liking that program and finding a job. Secondary to that, though, is the fact that I was a literate person. Like when I came to America, I loved reading and writing, right? I was so far ahead of my peers, let's say, particularly because typically when you come to the States at more than half the school year, they retain you.
Yeah.
Because they believe that you didn't have sufficient amount of education in the program or in the school setting, and so they kind of hold you back. I was pushed to the following grade, right? So I was moved forward instead of being retained. My siblings were retained. And then in trying to navigate and assimilating to American culture at that age, I stopped reading.
Oh.
Right.
So why assimilating into the new culture means that you stop reading?
Yeah. Well, I think it's for like a few reasons. One, I wanted to be American, right? So the ideas of what it meant to be American, which was at that time, as a 10-year-old, I really wanted to be American. And I noticed that reading wasn't cool for Black boys.
Oh.
Right. And then additionally,
American here, you mean like African American?
Yes, African American in the African American community, who I identify with at that time and even now. So reading wasn't seen as cool. That was one. Secondarily, my brother, being retained, he's 1 year older than me, being retained, he was in the same English language arts class as I was. And he had, difficulties reading.
Yeah.
He was illiterate at that time because we didn't have the same schooling in Guyana, right? We have different moms. And so he didn't really spend a lot of time in school. He also was later identified as having special education difficulties. So, but he's now doing phenomenal work. But at that time, I couldn't understand why he and I were in the same reading groups when I identify as a reading person and a literate person, and I read all the time. Additionally, because I was moved forward, right? And I was in the same group as him, who was not a literate person, who had reading difficulties, et cetera, et cetera. Additionally, being 10 and wanting to really fit in with the other students and with my peers, and them not really liking reading and not reading and it not being cool, that really impacted my development in reading. So I stopped reading all the way up till college. So I didn't read in middle school. I didn't read in high school. In fact, I didn't even know how to write a complete sentence when I entered college. But I knew that if I was going to succeed in college, that I needed to read everything, and then I needed to learn how to write. And so I spent the first 2 years, or particularly the first 2 semesters, but the 2 years of my college career learning how to read and write. And it was upon reflecting on that experience, or those experiences, that I ended up in this program, right? Because, I struggled with why I was in those reading groups, the writing group as my brother. I struggled with this idea that reading isn't cool in the Black community. And then I also noticed that in my practice teaching sixth graders, that many of the Black boys didn't like reading, right? They reported not liking reading. And it also it was seen as not cool. But then I noticed at the end of the school year, when I talked to my students about reading experiences that they reported positive reading experiences. And so I wanted to research more about that. And that's what drew me to the program. And then I found my advisor, who was doing similar work, but in the adolescent rather than the elementary scope. And now I find myself in the middle.
So in that process of doing the research about the reading experience, you also see the same old story repeat again even today, like when you teach in secondary school, or you also mentioned the positive reading experience. So you see something has been changed since the time you were 10?
Well, when I look at the data, this is a trend, right? Or it is documented that that the proficiency of Black boys in 3rd grade and 8th grade are far below their peers, their counterparts, right? Even being white boys, but also white girls and white girls and Black girls, right? So typically, and even other races, so their reading proficiency lag. But then there's also a cauldron of other experiences that I think impacts their overall schooling experiences. And you can say that those experiences impact their reading, or you can say that their reading impacts those experiences, right? Or the reading difficulties. So it's really a phenomenon that really needs to be looked at, because there's so many different factors that contribute to why Black boys have these adverse experiences.
Exactly. So I think that also the methodology that you adopt is to investigate the whole phenomenon and try to understand why it happens and what factors contribute, right?
Yeah. My research is a case study, right?
Yeah.
So I'm at the dissertation phase right now. And so in the past, I just successfully defended my proposal over the summer. And
congrats again, Tracy.
Thank you. So mine is a case study, right? And so it's really difficult for, when you're interested in the experiences of a particular group, it's really difficult to generalize it, right? To create a quantitative study that will really capture those experiences. And there's a lot of research that really looked at, the numbers, right? So how does the students' performance in kindergarten impact their reading experience in third grade and eighth grade and so on, right? There's studies that have looked at like IQs and then
Yeah, like
try
the
to
outcomes.
the outcomes, right?
In a number.
In a quantitative way,
Exactly.
right? And so what I'm really interested in is about those experiences. I was also curious about what were some of the things that I was doing in my practice that impacted those positive experiences with reading. And so that's my pilot study was focused on that. I looked at 3 boys in my class, and I interviewed them and did some observation and looked at some of their work and really captured some of the things that I'm doing that improved or impacted their reading experiences so that they can talk about it in a positive way. And so my goal in this dissertation is to kind of take that a step further. And so I'm looking at the experiences of 5 Black boys in ELA, the ELA context, under the instruction of a Black male teacher. Right. And then I'm also, looking at what are some of the structures and practice and philosophy and the beliefs and the values of that teacher and how that lends itself in his instruction to be able to create an experience for the Black boys. Then I also want to know, what are the outcomes as a result of this? But again, I'm not looking at outcomes in terms of numbers. I'm looking at what the students report and how they're demonstrating their learning in that ELA context. So it really builds on my past personal experiences, my professional experiences, and also what I'm seeing in the literature.
I can foresee a very empowered voices in the story, in the narrative that you try to depict. But it also means a challenge here is to manage a very rich data, right? Because you want to describe it in many aspects of the story of the phenomenon. So any tips, like how do you manage that kind of very rich data as a qualitative researcher? Any tips that you gain from advisor if your advisor is also doing qualitative research?
Yeah. So, one of the things is having a good theoretical framework and then conceptual framework. Mine takes on a social cultural perspective on literacy. And then I also draw on resource theory. So I looked at culturally relevant, culturally sustaining, culturally responsive pedagogy, right? And with those have some guidelines for what makes instruction culturally relevant and culturally sustaining and culturally responsive, right? So again, in my research, I talk about it in terms of resource theories because they value the resources, the strengths, the literacies, the competencies of my Black boys, right? And so because they take on that approach of valuing all that they contribute, so that means their voice, their experiences, and what they report, because they value all those things, I can really it gives me a lane, if you will, to analyze, what I observe from the teacher, what I hear from the teacher. And then subsequently, it also gives me a nice aim or a nice lane to be able to look at the Black boys and value what they have to say, but also the way in which I'm looking at it, right?
Yes.
And so, my analysis is really like a comparative content analysis. So I'm really looking for themes. I'm looking for things that stand out, right? Stand out particularly for each of the individual boys, but then also as a summation of their experiences, what broader themes I'm seeing, right? And then what does the literature say about those things? And what, this is really, I would say not as powerful, but what did I notice in my own practice to be able to understand this phenomenon? Right?
So I see a really close connection between a qualitative researcher and also the scientific method that he or she adopts, right?
Yeah.
So you start with the conceptual framework to help you stay organized, but the qualitative research methodology also allows creativity and observations along the way that you do the research.
Yeah.
So in order to find that conceptual framework, I guess you have to read a lot, like even read more than when you started in your undergrad, right?
Yeah, you know, what I think what was really good and what I really love about the program here is that from the first semester when I took the ETAP, I think it was 743, you know, learning about research methodology and what makes good research and who's a researcher and those kinds of things. When I was learning about those things, I can do it, or I was allowed to do it in a way that helped me understand my area of interest. And that was a trend that I noticed throughout the entire program. We could be learning about Dewey, and then it was like, well, what does this mean for your particular research, right? We could learn about curriculum and, you know, what the different types of curriculum, but you can then, you know, merge your own interests in there. So along the way, you're reading articles about your topic, and it might be related. Some of them were related, and then others weren't. But what it is that just give you a good foundation to understand what research exists. You know, one of the interesting thing, I'm very reflective, and one of the things that I reflected on recently is the fact that when I first started, I didn't know the difference between a journal or a database, right? And so reflecting back and harkening back on that, I have such a better understanding now of what a journal is. And then reading all these different articles, I was able to build up the different skills that got me to the gateway and then the pilot and then the
if you met with a first year doctoral student, what kind of skill you would advise them to develop in the very first phase of the program?
So I guess I'll say two things. One, I think, is trust the process, right? And be reflective in what you're doing. You know, the thing that's different from, you know, my first master's or undergrad compared to this doctoral program is that this is something that I wanted to do. And because I wanted to do it, it allowed me to kind of, how do you say?
Persevere and persist with what you are doing.
Yes, but then I also thought not only about the content that I was learning in each of the courses, but I kept reflecting on what I learned in that course in terms of my own development, in terms of my whole understanding of what it means to be a researcher, right? Or what is a positionality statement? Or what is a journal? What is a database, right? So I kept building on all those things and reflecting on my little learning. Not so much the content, because I don't remember what all the courses were about, but I remember what I learned outside of the content in all of those courses.
That's related to research and that can be applied to your own research.
Yes, but also related to me, my identity as a person in academia. So one of the things that we struggle with, you know, and even now I still struggle with it, is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Right? And so how do you essentially combat that? Is that you take stock of your learning beyond the content again. And so it allows you, and then when you get to the dissertation phase, you start to put those things together. Oh yeah, journals. Oh yeah, articles. Oh, okay. Oh, annotated bibliography. Oh, now I didn't know why they had us do annotated bibliography until I started working on my lit review.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Again, if I didn't reflect on that earlier on, then I wouldn't be able to put all those pieces to the puzzle to be able to get me here. So again, I think the program is well aligned that prepares you for this stage. And then the second thing that I would say is form relationships, meaningful relationships with students, but also colleagues. So your advisor is there to advise and help you, and they're going to help you through the process.
Yeah.
And my relationship with my advisor has also grown significantly. I remember the first time meeting my advisor, I said, I'm not the smartest. I don't have all the foundations, but I am willing to put in the work. So I said, don't give up on me. And that, I think, having that conversation with my advisor, she used that as a way to kind of help me get to the next level, or help me get where I am right now. So that was one relationship that I developed, right?
This is like comes from very honest
yeah
and willingness to learn as well.
Learn, right?
Yes.
So taking that stance, I think was really important for me. My relationship with you and Arwa and Wuri and Tibisai and all of these people that are in the program, when I was struggling with different things and I can ask them, I think that helped me, right?
Yeah.
You were a part of my dissertation proposal, right? And I was a part of Wuri's dissertation proposal. And so I think those
little moments, we feel that we are not alone in this journey.
Right? Because I knew that Wuri already went through that. I know you already went through that. And you know what I mean? And so I think that helps. And then secondary, I have some other professors like Dr. Tammy Ellis Robinson and Dr. Cheryl Dozier, and that I formed relationships with that were different than my department, colleagues or my department professors.
And they're still in the School of Education.
They're still in the School of Ed, right?
Same.
But I formed such relationships with them that they also, and these relationships, again, they're different. Each relationship is different, right?
Exactly.
So with my advisor, I have a very advisor,
mentor, mentee.
Yeah.
In terms of writing.
In terms of writing, in terms of academia, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But with Dr. Tammy Ellis Robinson and Dr. Cheryl Dozier, I have a more interpersonal relationship with them, right? A more professional relationship, right? They've put me in spaces to be able to grow, right? And then they're also we have such a relationship that I can text them and ask them really those small questions that you were like, I really need to know what the difference is between a journal and a database.
Yeah.
And then they'll respond, and I don't feel like
satisfied with the response?
No, I don't feel like I'm failing or I shouldn't be here. I feel supported, right? So again, I think the second point that I would make to first-year student is form those relationships with your advisor, with your peers, and then also with other professors that will help you along the way.
So in terms of making the connection like that, some doctoral students, they can be very shy. So a way in order to make that meaningful connection is to take their classes or to meet them and talk to them during like conference and introduce about yourself. Like how did you make those connections?
Yeah. A lot of it was organic, right? So in terms of my advisor, that is a set in stone, right? You meet with your advisor and talk about different things. In terms of my colleagues in my class, after class, we talked about different things. I asked questions. You engage in class discussion and kind of take those risks. Because I think part of this too is about taking risks.
Taking risks.
And so, you engage in conversation in class, and then you hear about their stories, and you're like, oh wow, tell me about that. Wow, right? And you did that when I first met you too, right? And oh, what's your story? Oh, tell me. Oh, that must have been really difficult. I remember having some of those like informal conversations after class or in between class when we were grabbing snacks and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And I remember that, and I think that's part of it. And then I really like what you said about taking courses with those professors and staying in contact with those professors. Dr. Carol Rogers, who's also on my committee. I took a course with her. I did well, and I really enjoyed that experience. I took another course with her, right? And then I would have conversations with her that weren't related to the content or related to my studies. And again, what that does is it brings down that perceived I don't want to say power structure. It makes it so that she's more relatable. So now when I look at Dr. Rogers, I don't look at her as a professor.
Yeah, like there's power distance between
Yeah, like there's a distance between.
Yeah.
I see her as someone that I can go talk to about, maybe a struggle that I might be having in terms of whatever, right?
Yes.
Like I know that she's someone there. So I think having those conversations and a small conversation and these small conversations build up, right, over time, that allows you to kind of have relationships. And again, the relationships are all different.
Yes.
With professors and colleagues and your advisor, and those things help you along the way.
That's a very useful strategy, and also it helps you to gain a view about the professor in a more holistic way, not just only professional, but also to connect with you on the person level. Yeah. And then you're also working at the same time of studying. So how do you manage like time management? What's some strategies of time management? How do you find time for doing research?
So this is one of the areas in which I struggled.
Yeah.
Right. So doing the coursework, I think it was easier because you had classes you would go to, that's something is due. You find time over the weekend and after work and so on and so forth to manage that. I think the more difficult part was when I started doing my pilot.
Yes.
I was done with my coursework and you really had to do it on your own.
Yeah.
That became a little more daunting. I could have been further along, but there was a period of time where I'm like, I'll do it later. I don't feel like writing today. And so I wasn't productive. But then I started to talk to Dr. Ellis Robinson, right, and Dr. Kumi. And what they suggested was write often, regularly. And it doesn't have to be extended period of times of writing. Just the act of writing regularly will take you where you need to go. And so I tried it. I created a schedule where I would go to work, I would go to the gym, get something to eat, and then I came to the business building and I sat at the same table every day. And I wrote a little bit. Some days I wrote a paragraph. Some days I just sat and read articles. Some days I revised that little paragraph that I wrote. Some days I couldn't get any new thing on the page.
But you did some thinking.
But I did some thinking, right? And some days I just brain dumped. I just dumped everything that I was thinking on the page that was related to whatever phase of the proposal or the pilot that I was on, and I just wrote. And then over time, those little things that you were doing, those intentional setting aside time and writing, and it came together, right? Yeah. So what I would also say is, setting time aside, and it's not about, I don't feel like doing it, right? It's not about enjoying it in the particular moment, because part of this is work, right? So you're not gonna feel like writing every day, but that's not why you're here, right? It's about putting in some work, even if you feel like it, if you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Right? I equate it to working out. When you work out, when you start working out, you don't see gains right away.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
You don't see it the second day. In fact, you can't put your finger on when you start noticing gains. But then someone might say, hey, are you working out? And then, right? Or down the road, you start to feel a little bit more, the workouts come a little easier, right?
Yeah.
But you don't, again, you can never pinpoint when it happened, but it's happening. And so if you invest time over a period of time, right? If you invest energy in I would say, energy over time, then you're going to have a product. And so, but I love what I'm doing, but sometimes you can love it, but you still don't want to write.
I think that is the message that you want to highlight from the beginning, is to trust the process, and you just give us an example of how to do that.
Yeah.
Like even you don't feel like doing it, but just trust the process, and you will start to see the gain. Like,
Yes.
but after an amount of time that you invest in it.
Yes.
So, but basically, in order to maintain that kind of hectic schedule, you have to stay healthy, right? And I see that you like exercise, and how about like nutrition, and the way that you take care of yourself. Any self-care tips or any resources on campus that you use for even entertainment or building like a good social and physical mental state, for example?
Well, I not on campus, right? And I think that's one of the differences between my undergrad experience, where
with doctoral students,
students, right? In undergrad, I went to the curriculum, I went to the tutors, I went to, I used all these programs, and then I was an RA, so there was a bunch of different, social programs that helped with my mental health at that time, right? Yes. But in terms of this, I think there's a few things that I think helped me to build mental fortitude. I think one is the exercising. Two, I have found that by listening to podcasts. Oh yeah, we're doing a podcast. Right?
Okay, everyone, please subscribe.
Subscribe. Right? So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there is one gentleman that I think really moves me to action.
Yeah.
His name is Eric Thomas, right? He's also called the hip hop preacher. And I listen to him, and a lot of what he says is about mindset.
Yeah.
Right? It's about the work, right? It's about the investing, right? And so on and so forth. And so I think that has really helped me mentally. But I also spend time with friends and family, right? I have other interests outside of this.
I met your family during your thesis defense. I think it's so, I don't know, but whenever I told my parents about my thesis, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but just, their presence there to support you. Yes. It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you do your work, don't isolate it yourself, and then just also reach out to your family as well, right?
Yeah. You have to stay grounded.
Stay grounded.
You gotta stay grounded. So again, I still hang out with my friends. I still give time to my lady. I still have other interests other than this, right? So, like I started a YouTube channel on teaching people how to invest in stocks and crypto. So I did that. I guess I'm very physically active.
Yes.
At the same time, like I'm a social person. So if a friend says, "Oh, I have, a wedding, or I have a event, or this," I'm there.
Yes.
I might write for a few minutes, my 30 minutes or so, and then I'll go spend time, because I think that also helps you to be able to be productive.
Yeah.
So don't isolate yourself.
So your motto is also like work hard, be persistent, and then play hard.
Yeah.
Actually, it's help when you play hard and then come back to work to refresh.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Crazy, for the episode. I think a lot of
Thank you so much for joining me today this week, and we'll be back with more useful tips and wonderful episodes in the near future. Thank you for your listening.